So we met in a way that I've met a lot of the people in our industry originally, just
Yeah,
sending like a
I
cold
know.
message, dude. So
And here we are.
I know, right? Um, so I'm super excited to dig in with you. It was I got the message from you, and I just your experience sort of speaks for itself. So I want to start with how you got into sales. Are you one of those crazy people like me that went from marketing to sales? And did you go back and forth at all? What were you doing? I think it was at Cunning. I was seeing on your LinkedIn
Oh my
profile. Was
gosh,
that a
cunning.
marketing job?
Yeah, all right. You're bringing me back, Jason, to so I graduated college in 2009. Was a tough time to graduate. I went to school to be an art director. That
Okay.
was what I wanted to do. I wanted to work for advertising agencies. I wanted to be the visionary to create the the concepts for marketing and advertising campaigns and be the one to pitch them to clients. And that was what I went to school for. That's what I studied. And Cunning, that first job, was an advertising agency where I was doing exactly that. But it's interesting, for people that go to school for that, the folks that end up in sales, really ad sales, it's kind of looked at like failure, like, right, like you couldn't make it as a creative, and so you moved into ad sales, right? And so that job at Cunning was an internship. That
Oh
was my
wow,
first job. It
that's
was an
funny.
internship. I was so excited to have it. I lived in New Jersey. I took 2 hours each way to commute in and out of Manhattan. It paid $100 a week, but it cost me $150 a week to commute. And so, like, that was the situation in 2009 for recent graduates.
Oh
It was tough. And so I was actually at a career fair, representing Cunning as an agency, trying to help them hire more, hopeless interns like me. And this guy came up to me. His name is Tony Himes. We'll never forget this. And he's like, "Tell me about your agency." And so I start telling him, and here's an application. Do you want to apply? And he's like, "Oh, no, no, no. Like, I'm here hiring people too." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Well, nice to meet you." Right? He moved on. And then we go to leave this little career fair, and him and I end up in the elevator together. And he's like, "I think you'd be really good at sales. Like, here's my card. Like, give me a call if you're looking for a job." And so, honestly, I took the interview just for funsies. Like, I just thought it would be good to get practice. And when I walked into this sales office, it was very
yeah,
similar to an advertising agency. It was big open space, bright colors. I mean, this was, a while ago. And so,
mm,
people are hitting the gong when they close deals. And, there was Bloody Mary brunches and happy hours. It was
hell
like
yeah,
a time that is no more. But it was super fun. And so I was like, wow, maybe I could give this a try. They were like,
yeah,
you don't need any sales experience, and you'll probably make between 60 and 100K in your first year. And I was like, sold. Tell me no more. Because again, I was making $100 a week and taking a loss on commuting into the city for that. And so took a
yeah.
stab on it, and I fell into it, ended up being good at it, I guess. And the rest is sort of history. That's where I got my start. That was the first sales job. It was called Media Planet. It was in advertising sales.
Those are the best sales jobs where they
Yeah.
advertise no experience
And I'll tell
required.
you, it is a
Be like,
high
yeah,
turnover sales
that's
work. Like,
right.
they are, I've learned since then that there are companies that are like product and engineering led, and then there are companies that are like sales led. And Media Planet was all about the sales. Salespeople were king.
Yeah,
We were the vast majority of the employees at the company. And if you did well, you got paid really well, and you got additional responsibilities. And they had a really clear hierarchy that you could move up. And so I was immediately drawn to that. I'm like, wow, commission, making good money, and there's a path for me to move up to be a senior AE and then be a manager and a director and all that stuff. And so I really just fell into it. I fell into it like a lot of people did.
yeah, I love that. When you think about early, like in your first couple of years, the when do you feel like the dots really started to connect from a discovery standpoint in terms of being able to step back and look at, oh, I was given these like prescribed questions and I know I'm supposed to ask these and then we're supposed to do a demo or a presentation at some point. And when were you able, like, what was the aha
Yeah,
moment, I guess,
it's
for you in
interesting.
sales? If you can
If I'm
remember,
being
if
honest,
there
there
was a
was a
moment.
moment, and the moment was fairly late. It really came right at the beginning of working at LinkedIn as a sales leader, where I actually got the first formal, legitimate,
Mm,
high level sales training and coaching in my career. And so my success at Media Planet in ad sales and how to succeed in that role, and really back then in ad sales in general, was your passion. It was like how fast you could talk and how good your pitch was. And how booming your voice was, whatever it was a lot about, like, I remember my manager then telling me, like, Janelle, like, all you have to do is just like outrun people, get them excited. There's a sense of urgency, like make calls all day, like drive that urgency and create it. And so that was where a lot of my success came from. And so it was really cool to couple that energy and that passion, that desire, that hustle with formal training and coaching. And so that was really where the dots clicked for me. Probably the first 6 months at LinkedIn is like, okay, my team, what my reps need to do here is they need to figure out the exact pain points that these prospects are dealing with, confirm that that's actually what our solution solves for, and then crush it in connecting the dots to their pains and our solution. And so that was probably the moment for me.
Interesting. Is there anything that comes to mind conceptually with, like, when you say pain and problem, like, really understanding that, like, this is essentially the fuel for the deal. Like, this is the
Yeah.
thing that creates action. Was there anything that through teaching it like that, that I'm just asking mostly for people listening to this that might not, they might be on that journey right now of connecting the dots, or they might be teaching people, how to connect the dots. Anything conceptually stick out to you that's like, "Oh, okay, I get
I
what we're doing
think the
here."
concept of the Sandler pain funnel has always really stuck with me. I think when you first start doing discovery, you're kind of at that top level. Tell me your
Mm,
problem. All right, cool. Let me solve it. And you're right, discovery is the fuel for the deal. And so I like thinking about that funnel. Like the deeper you can go, right? We've got a surface level pain. Cool. Maybe we can sell something. We've got a deeper pain underneath that surface pain. What is that surface pain causing? That's going to give us more fuel. If you can get all the way down to like, if I don't solve this problem, I'm going to get fired from my job and not be able to support my wife and children, or I'm not going to be able to buy my next, my vacation home, or like a personal pain. Like that's kind of all the way at the bottom of the funnel. Like how is this impacting them personally? Um, the deeper you go, the more fuel you get for the deal.
yeah. Okay, I think that's a really good segue into just talking through your process. So, do you wanna give people just some perspective on, feel free, you can elaborate a little bit more on your recent sales experience, and you've recently in the last
Yeah.
couple of years started a business, and maybe give us a little bit more perspective. What kind of customers you work with now, what kind of problems you help solve, and then let's
Yeah.
talk about
All
discovery.
right, cool. Let's get into it.
We'll get
So,
into it here.
background on me, I'm Janelle. I work with startup founders and CEOs, and I help them scale and optimize their sales teams. And so, a lot of my clients are in that somewhere around seed or Series A. They've gotten enough initial momentum to catch the attention of investors and secure funding to begin with. And now they need to up level. They need to up level to meet those investors' expectations or to set themselves up to secure that next round of funding. And a lot of them kind of come from a similar place as me, where like we've had success but we don't quite know why. Like we've got a lot of passion and energy for what we sell, but like don't know the formal tactics and techniques. And so for a lot of these clients, like sales can feel overwhelming, and a lot of them have reps selling in these roles that also don't have sales backgrounds. And so like how do we get to the next level? How do we refine our sales process? How do we up level our skills?
Yeah.
What skills do we even need? How do we hire top salespeople, onboard them, keep them engaged, get them performing quickly? So that's the type of work that I do, and it leads me to a ton of coaching with SDRs and AEs and sales managers, because that is a lot of the how. We're going to come up with the strategy with the founder or CEO, but then a lot of it is then getting in with their team, listening to the calls. For some of these clients, I actually also just, it's kind of fun. I take sales calls for some of them just to keep it fresh and fill gaps. A lot of them have gaps. Like, oh, someone
Yeah.
left and the next person isn't starting. Can you take the leads for the next couple of weeks? And so, I've done SDR, AE, sales manager, sales director, VP of sales roles myself, but it's fun now as a consultant. I get to support a lot of these roles and still get to like get my hands on sales calls. So yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I was looking forward to talking to you, is because, like, you do work,
Yeah.
like, you get your hands dirty, with the clients. Like, you're in
Yeah.
there selling their solution, which
Yeah.
is,
You
super
learn a lot.
impressive. Um, let's talk discovery. So, oh, I bet. Yeah, I have learned so much as a, I don't even know what to call myself, a consultant, trainer,
Yeah.
coach, kind of all of the above, I guess, where you really battle test your frameworks when you have to apply it across industries in personas that
Oh
you
yeah.
have not personally sold to, where you like really get a better understanding of, hey, this cold calling framework that I teach, does that
Right.
work when you call into an HR person versus an IT versus a security versus a sales versus a marketing versus a big enterprise business versus SMB sales motion and just like
Yeah.
kind of everywhere in between. Um, let's start with discovery. So we kind of talked about breaking this up into there's kind of like a prep component of this. There's a vision matching component of it.
Yeah.
I like that you call it vision matching. There's a follow up, and then sort of how this segues into the demo. Before we get into those 4 stages, what do you see from your observation of doing this a ton and working with a lot of clients? What are the common mistakes in just the approach and how they
Yeah.
treat
Good
discovery?
question. One of the most common mistakes that I see is simply just skipping over discovery or doing a really weak job at it. Like we don't know, like I sit on a lot of demos where at the end of it, and
Yeah.
the people that I coach, they see this in their feedback, they know this from me. I'm like, I start the session and I'm like, why, why were we on this call? Like what, why is the person here? We have no idea. And so the rest of the call falls flat because we didn't really get clear on what their problems are. And so I feel like that's the first thing I see is just making sure that you're actually taking the time to learn discovery skills and do discovery. Cause like we said at the top of this, like that's the fuel for the deal. And so I think that's one of the more common mistakes I make. I think another mistake I see is if they are doing discovery, we're not going deep enough. And so it's super surface level. Tell me about your problems. Oh, you have that problem? Cool. Let me show you my stuff. Instead of really pausing and pumping the brakes and having an actual two-way conversation with them to figure out exactly where they're at, where they're struggling, what the desired outcome that they want to achieve is, and making sure that your solution is the right solution for that. I think that's a lot of times when I come up like, why are we on this call? It's like, I don't know if this is the right solution for this person. We need to catch that earlier on. And that's where discovery comes in.
Got it. So skipping discovery, I laughed when you said that because it's it's crazy. I mean, some of the thinking is, well, they booked a call through the inbound
Uh-huh.
form. They want to know about our solution.
Right.
Like they want to see
Right.
our
So let me tell them all
platform.
about it.
So I'm going to just basically, yeah, let me just ask them how many
Yep.
people they want to set up in their platform. And let me just start showing.
Yeah.
Um, and then the surface level, not digging deep enough. That's
Yeah.
something I'm excited to dig into with, because there's definitely an art to, the Sandler pain funnel, especially where it's like how to do that in a way where the person feels like they want to comply and are actually engaged in the conversation versus just like, dude, why are
Oh
you
yeah.
asking me so
That's
many
a common
goddamn
thing I
questions?
see. Yeah.
Um,
I see
let's
that.
talk
I
about the
see
prep
that often.
component.
It feels like an interrogation instead of a
Yeah,
conversation. And
it's
so when we talk about vision matching, we'll get to that, but that's another common thing I see.
so prep. What are your guidelines and approach around? I know that I have a call
Yeah.
coming up. What happens next between that time and the call
Yeah.
that
Okay,
when
cool.
we
Let's talk
actually
about
do the call?
discovery prep. So I don't have huge amounts of mind-blowing knowledge on this. Like there's so many resources out there for how to prep for calls, but this is just one thing that I want to make sure I get across today is, I see two things. I see reps either way over prepping. They spend hours prepping and they essentially become like a librarian, right? Or on the flip side, they don't spend nearly enough time prepping and they come across like they're kind of like a cowboy shooting from the hip, right? And when it comes to discovery prep, you want to be more like a sniper, right? You want to really target your prep to as much as you need to effectively run that call and nothing more. And I think depending on the solution you sell, the person you're talking to, how complex it is going to vary. I'm a big fan of the concept of 3x3 research. Have you heard that 3x3 prep, 3x3 call research? Have you heard that term? I'm sure you have. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, 3 minutes,
Now,
three
I'll be honest,
things
three
type of
minutes
type of
would
deal.
never work
Yeah.
for me. I feel like 3 minutes is like it goes by in a blink. So I don't know that 3 minutes is appropriate, but I like that concept of
Yep.
defining like, when you think about how 3x3 works, there's a list of like, these are all the things you're going to scan in 3 minutes. Make a list that's tailored to what you offer and make sure that you go through that for every single call. It shouldn't take you hours. It also shouldn't take you just a couple minutes. Maybe it's 10 minutes or 20 or 30, but I think the key is like finding the right balance, because you don't want to, again, you don't want to become a librarian. You don't need to know every single thing about this person's business and history, but you need to know enough to be able to run an effective discovery call and ask actually appropriate questions.
So if you were advising one of your clients, what's the 80/20 rule here in terms of like what are the
Yeah.
kind of core things that in almost every case we're going to want to know
Yeah.
coming
I've
into a
got something
discovery call?
super basic, which again, I feel like a lot of people miss the basics. So, want to go back to this, but make sure you pronounce the person's name and company. Like, make sure you get the name and company right. I actually sat on a sales call recently where they got my company name
Yeah.
wrong and mixed me up with some other prospect, and it didn't matter how good the solution was. I mean, granted, the rest of the call sucks, so I probably wouldn't have bought anyway. But that is like that's going to set you off from a bad place from the start. And I know it's simple, but it happens more often than you would think, where we mix company names up, we get the person's name right or wrong, or maybe they have a more complicated name that isn't obvious how to pronounce it, and we fail to actually take the time to ask, how do you pronounce your name? I want to make sure I'm referring to you correctly. And so I think that's important. And then, I see a lot of reps getting on calls where they've Googled the company, they've looked at the website, maybe they've Googled the contact, but they haven't actually looked at the prospect's LinkedIn profile, which again is like no brainer. Where are they based? Where have they
Yeah.
worked? Are they new in the role? Have they been in the role for 10 years? Have they moved up very quickly? Do you have anything in common? So I think those are the two things I see that I just wish I didn't see, is like simple things like get the name and company right, make sure you're pronouncing it right, ask for clarification if you don't know, and then make sure you're looking up the person you're talking to and getting an understanding of how long they've been in the role. I think there are other things that are important depending on the solution that you sell. Like, I have a client that sells an influencer marketing software. Well, you're probably going to want to see what that company's been doing for influencer marketing to be able to craft some intelligent questions versus, a client that sells an HR solution. You're probably going to want to look at that company's job openings and, hiring growth on LinkedIn and that type of stuff. And so, there's general stuff that you're going to want to make sure you do every time. And then there's going to be tailored stuff that you're going to identify is important for you based on what you sell in the industry that you're in.
Yeah, the what are you looking for when you look at someone's past work experience in terms of the number of years they might be in role, like promotion path? What is that information going to
Good question. I
help you
feel like
with?
the biggest thing that I just like to look for first and foremost is if someone is new in their role. If someone is new in their role, they likely haven't proven themselves at their current company yet.
Yep.
And so, are they going to have the power and the authority to actually push a solution through? Are we going to need to involve other people? Like, what's on the line? What's at stake for them? I think that's something I always look for. It's also really nice when someone's fairly new in a role to congratulate them on their new role and be aware of that. Hey, you're in a new role. Must be super exciting. How has it been? Making sure that you're picking up on that. I also like to see when someone has moved up through a company, multiple different levels. That's an indicator to me that they likely
Yeah.
have some authority and some credibility there. Like, they've been recognized and been promoted, and so that's just good intel to have. And then I just like to see where people have worked in the past. Sometimes there's commonalities. Sometimes we have mutual connections. Sometimes it's a place that I used to work, or a friend used to work, or it's based in a city I used to live in. And so I just like to look at where people have been and what they've done, and just check that off the box to make sure that I'm I know what I'm talking about when I speak to them.
Yeah. It's funny because with executives too, if you got like a VP of something in their
Yeah.
first, 3 to 6 months, yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely have something to prove. And they
Uh
probably have
huh.
very clear objectives and there's probably things that they were
Yeah.
brought there to
Yeah.
to fix. Um, you mentioned another thing I don't want to gloss over, and it was essentially how they get the job done right now. So if you sell something like influencer software or another one of my clients sells a customer like a digital
Mm,
experience type of solution where it's built for call centers to essentially figure out why do people call into the contact center to talk to customer support and not self-serve through
interesting.
the website or through instant message, like what does and it's like you can go on the website and experience
Right.
what that's like. I think it's a little tougher for us because we have to
Right.
interact with a salesperson,
Yeah.
which might not be a bad idea, if it's something that we could do, but just experiencing whatever it is that you help with, experiencing that and looking at how they get the job done. I mean, that's I feel like with discovery, the goal in that first call is to get to the real
Yeah.
stuff as quickly as possible, and doing great research just
Yeah.
helps you
Oh
get to
yeah.
real stuff so that you're not burning 10, 15 minutes trying to get to the
Yeah.
point in a 30-minute
Before
call,
it's, I see a lot of people spending time just tell me about your role. Where do you live? What, it's like, let's actually get to the meat. If we know that, we can go in showing that we've done our research and we know who the person is, which allows us to go deeper in our discovery
Yep.
and therefore get more fuel for the deal.
Yeah. I think another thing, I'm curious your thoughts on this, is as a sales rep, you really like the status, I feel like between you and the prospect, oftentimes we set ourselves up in a sales conversation to
Yes.
be of lower status, where the prospect knows that we want their business and they have options and they essentially have all the power because they control the purse strings. And one of the things I don't think that gets talked about a lot is like how to set yourself up to be
Mhm.
the expert. Like how do you demonstrate expertise? And one of those ways that you can really simply do that is just being really educated and informed when
Yeah.
you come into that first call, to where the prospect is trusting that, hey, Janelle has
Hmm.
seen my situation before. Like this is someone I feel
Right.
comfortable guiding me in this decision. And if I was to give you a really specific example, the people when we implemented HubSpot for our business, the person that I hired, their agency to help us implement it, like I should not have
It's
hired
funny. I've
that
had a
person,
similar experience with,
you know?
HubSpot
And there
agencies. You
were
want to
certain
find
things that,
it's a really important
oh
partner to
god,
have for
it's
your business. A lot of my clients struggle with that because they don't have the internal in-house expertise to implement HubSpot and build pipelines and build automations. And so, yeah, it's
yeah.
be careful who you hire there.
Yeah, I just wasn't thinking about what's the impact this is gonna have. It seems kinda obvious now looking back at it. It's like this is the software that we were using to run our business. The people that you have helping you implement that, knowing that they have done
Yep.
this for people like me and people more successful than me, it's there's a trust there that when they recommend something, like one of her recommendations was to gate all of our content and charge $10 a month for it. I'm like, that just is a really
Oh, that's
stupid idea.
hilarious.
As soon as she shared that, it's like a
No,
month in, I was
yeah.
like, oh God, I hired
Uh,
the wrong person to do this. So I think there's something really big to setting yourself up as the
yes.
expert in your company, as the experts to really be able to advise the client. What are your thoughts on that? And how do you think about that through discovery and sort of this
Yeah,
prep
you reminded
process
me
and that
because
kind
there's
of thing?
no amount of like, couple minutes prep before a call that's like gonna just make you magically an industry expert. You first want to make sure that you know your industry. I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day with great advice. There's so much great advice out there, but like find out where the people in your industry are spending their time. What groups are they in? What conferences are they attending? What podcasts they listen to? And get your hands on that material and see what the industry's
Yep.
talking about, right? That's going to make you come across as a much more trusted advisor and expert. But you said something that I just wanted to go back to that even playing field. This comes up in my coaching a lot, and I have another tactic, not necessarily tied to prep, just another tactic to like even because you're right, like a prospect and a sales rep coming together. As a sales rep, we think we're inferior, right? But ultimately, this is two people coming together to see if it's worth our time to spend more time together, right? So, like, yes, this person's taking the 30 minutes out of their day to have this call with you,
Yep.
but you're also taking 30 minutes out of your day to have the call with them and try to help them. And if your solution helps them, awesome. And if it doesn't, you're going to let them know. And so, like, we want to make sure we're coming in at an even playing field. And small tactical things that I see that shoot that in the foot are, oh, Jason, thank you so much for setting aside the time to get on this call. Like, thank you so much for giving me the time. It puts us below, we're
Yeah.
like, oh, we're so grateful that you just gave us a couple minutes of your time. So, super simple tactic is to flip that. Hey, Jason, I'm really glad we were able to find the time to connect today. I know we're both really busy, but it sounds like you're dealing with some really interesting problems that I think we might be able to solve for. So I'm glad we could find the time to have the conversation, right? Instead of thank you so much,
Yeah.
now we're on an even playing field. I'm glad we both were able to find the time to connect.
Yeah. I love there's little just flips like that where like another little thing is Like when a rep shares a calendar link and there's like literally like 30 hours of white space on that person's calendar, it just there's like little things like that you got to be thinking about that even if your calendar's not totally booked, like block off some time so it doesn't look like you're just
I know.
so desperate, for a prospect's time. So let's talk about the discovery conversation. So this middle part, this
Yeah.
vision matching, excuse me. You want to explain what that concept is and give us kind of a breakdown of how we should think about structuring that first
Yeah. Okay.
conversation
So
with a
let's talk about
prospect.
vision matching. So vision matching is essentially the antidote, in my opinion, to a discovery call feeling like an interrogation. And so I know, I've heard the term vision matching thrown around in different ways, and some people think about it differently. I think, originally how I was taught was do all of your discovery, ask all of your questions, and then summarize that in a really nice bow with how you're going to help them. And that's your vision match. You're taking the pain point and you're presenting how you're going to solve it. I found that in practice, that doesn't work super well. One, after a 20 minutes of discovery, it is really hard to summarize high level and have this beautiful delivered, vision match statement. Um, but it can make your call feel like an interrogation. And so I like weaving vision matching in throughout my discovery. And so I won't ask more than one or two questions without coming in with some sort of statement of value to keep them engaged. So, um, Jason, why'd you take the call today? I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z
Mhm.
problem. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. I just talked to another customer last week and they were dealing with the same problem. And like, here's what happened with them and how we were able to solve it. Like, tell me more about how long this has been going on. Oh man, like yeah, that's tough. Like, well, our time to from sign to result is about 3 months, and so we would definitely be able to cut that down for you. So you're essentially, as you're doing discovery and uncovering things, you're dropping these nuggets of value, and it's kind of hard to do generally because it's very specific. But like, if we could talk about a specific solution, I could probably give a better example. Like we can go back to this influencer marketing software. Why'd you take the call today? It's really annoying finding influencers for my business. I know that's actually the common problem we solve for. No one wants to talk to influencers, and this solution is going to really get that off your plate. Like, how long has this been a problem? What else have you tried? Oh yeah, I talked to someone who tried that, and like, here's what they found after they worked with us. So like, it's dropping those little nuggets and keeping that person hooked and interested, and essentially earning you the right to ask the next question, which I think is a big thing in discovery that we sometimes forget, is that like, we have to earn the right to ask questions. And so if you try to set your call up with like, I'm going to ask all these questions and then I'm going to tell them how I can help, like, you might not get their guard down as low as you would have been if you vision matched throughout your discovery. So that's the concept of vision matching.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's kind of, you hear the
Uh-huh.
tennis match analogy a lot, right? And a lot of the discovery is I hit the ball over to your side of the court and it just
Uh-huh.
stays there for
Uh-huh.
20 minutes, right? And as a prospect, I being sold to, I get kind of impatient with like, I just want to figure out, is this thing going to do what I think it can do to solve
Right.
this problem that I think that I have? Or are you going to tell me something else that I may or may not know? And essentially what you're doing, the statement of value, I mean, you're weaving in customer stories, which I think also has an element of
Mm-hmm.
social proof that really helps, where there's this constant reinforcement of Janelle has seen this problem before. She's worked with people like me. She's
Yep.
familiar with this. There's this trust that's built up. And I forget the stat. It's a little over 50%, according to Gartner, of buyers experience buyer's regret
Mm,
after purchasing software. I don't know. Like when I read that stat, I don't know about you, I kind of shit my pants. I was like, over half of the time when B2B software is purchased, they regret the purchase. They
yeah.
would not have done that again. So buyers are in this mode too, where there's so
Yeah.
much information online about their experience, and they've probably bought something similar to yours before, to where
Oh
they kind
yeah.
of bring that
Yeah.
baggage into the conversation too, where they're just inherently more skeptical of buying stuff because, hey, in the last decade, half of the time when we buy stuff, it doesn't actually produce the ROI that the rep said that
Yeah.
it was
I know. And I
supposed to
think we get
produce. So this
right.
reducing
And I think we get
skepticism.
scared of that. We're like, oh no, they dealt with a competitor, they're going to be really tough. It actually is really valuable information. When you talk about these value statements and showing what you know and being an expert, like, it's really interesting when you start to hear people talk about the companies they got burned from, and you ask more, well, what happened? And ideally your solution, that's not going to
Yep.
happen, but you then take that and you carry that into future conversations. Like, oh man, I'm really sorry to hear you're having that you had that challenge with this platform. I actually talked to 4 customers last month, and they all dealt with the same thing. Like, here's how we were able to solve that for them. So like, no pressure at all here, but like, I'm really confident that that is not going to happen here, and this is why. I think sometimes we start to get scared. We're like, oh no, they're skeptical, they're not going to buy, but it's a great discovery opportunity. Tell me about your experience. Why was it so bad? What was the promise that wasn't delivered? Really understanding that, I think, can help you combat that skepticism and also give you the
Yeah.
insight to then use that in future calls. Without, of course, bashing anyone. It's always a delicate dance, right? Because
Love
we
it.
never want to bash competitors. Competitors are, it's a good thing
Yeah.
when there's other people in your space, right? It means that the space is worthy of investment and attention and solutions, but it's a delicate balance.
No, absolutely. So what do you recommend the first 5 or 10 minutes of the discovery conversation? How do you recommend a rep starts? How should the call start? What are some
Yes.
key things that
Okay.
we should be aware
I know
of?
again this is silly to kind of think back. It's very elementary level, but like take a couple minutes to build some rapport. I see a lot of calls where we jump right in, and I get we want to get to the point. You could always say like, I know we want to get to the point as quickly as possible, but I noticed you're based in Lake Tahoe. I saw you guys were getting a ton of snow today. Like, like you want to have some sort of couple minutes of showing that you're a human. That's going to be different for every rep and every seller. Like, how do you show that you're a human? I know I had a lot of my reps at LinkedIn when they when they would get on calls and they'd go to share their screen. They would very strategically have the backdrop of their laptop be them and their baby, them and their puppy, their family, or like something that was a conversation starter. So when they went to share the screen, they're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's just my husband. That's just my daughter. She just turned 1, right? So it like that was their way of trying to humanize the conversation. And so I think that's
Yeah.
first things first, humanize the conversation. It takes a couple minutes, but
Yeah.
it's important to get someone's guard down. If you try to just jump into it, they might not want to give you the time of day to engage in your discovery. The second thing is upfront social contract. I see this skipped a lot. I know people refer to it as different things, but upfront social contract is essentially an agenda plus a buy-in. So like, and I think it's really important for discovery, especially if you don't plan to share pricing on discovery. I know I'm a fan of not sharing pricing on discovery, but there are instances where you want to share a range or you might need to share something to try and disqualify someone. So I think upfront social contract is important, especially if you're not going to share price on that call. Even if you are, like, this is what we're going to cover today. Like, I'm going to ask you some questions about your business and what you're dealing with, and then I want to tell you, like, if I think we can help, I'm going to tell you how. And then at the end, we'll decide if it makes sense to talk next steps. And one of those next steps will be reviewing pricing. But first, today, this is just about making sure we're on the same page and that it's going to be worth investing our time in. And so I see either, sometimes we just give an agenda and we don't get buy-in, or sometimes we skip it altogether. But it's really important to make sure that like, if you know what you're going to cover on the call, share that with that person and then make sure that they agree to that and buy in, right? That way at the end of the call, they're like, well, this is crazy. Tell me the price. Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, like this is really just to see if we're the right fit. Now I'm going to take this information, I'm going to pull together a proposal, and I'm really excited to demo and show you the pricing on our next call. But that upfront social contract, I think, is key. Do you use the term upfront social contract or agenda, or have you heard that term before?
I've heard upfront contract, Sandler calls it. I
Yes,
call it an alignment
it's the same thing.
statement. It's all kind of the same thing. Um, this is so important though, because it's like Clary's got, I forget, Sidekick, I think it's called now. It used to be called Wingman, but their conversational intelligence tool. Dude, I want to say if I remember the stat correctly, it was something like over half of reps
Yes,
don't set an agenda at the beginning of a
I know.
sales call. And I was like blown
I
away by
know.
that.
And
It's
it's
like,
not
are
just
you kidding me?
discovery. It's every
So just
single call.
basic
It's, maybe it's your 6th or 7th call with them. Hey, so
every
I know
call.
we've, already covered X, Y, and Z. The goal of the call today is to uncover the concerns that your team had and to go through each one and decide next steps. Like there needs to be an upfront social contract at the beginning of every single customer interaction. Like make sure you are on the same page for your
Yeah.
call on what you're going to be covered and what's going to be covered and what the desired outcome is.
It's just
Yeah,
good business acumen. Like think about
right.
internally. Any executive that is running a meeting always sets an agenda at the beginning of the meeting so people know what
I
to
know.
do. It's just good business acumen. How do you then kind of segue into, because where oftentimes reps will run into challenges here is like figuring out like finding something to latch onto and talk about that's related to what
Yes.
your solution can help with. Where sometimes it'll go in this direction of if we're doing the influencer marketing route, it'll be like, yeah, so we're looking for a tool to help us manage our influencers. And it goes like this really just the conversation stays very features and functions type of thing. And it never really gets to anything strategic around what the business is trying to accomplish or anything like that. And reps oftentimes will get lost, right there, or just have trouble where the prospect will just shoot the shit about
Yeah.
something for 20
Oh
minutes
yeah.
that's kind of unrelated
Yep.
to what they can help them with. So how does that how do you recommend best segueing to like get to the really meat of the
Yeah.
conversation
Okay.
as
So
quickly
here's
as
my tips.
possible?
This comes up in my coaching a lot. There are 3 discovery questions that you should be asking on every call. In fact, you should be on every discovery call. You should be starting your discovery calls with these questions because essentially it gives you the lay of the land to know where to dig deeper. And so the first one, super obvious. Why'd you take the call today? Why are we on the phone? And so there's different ways to ask that. I typically like to tee it up like, listen, Jason, like I know we're both super busy. You've got a lot on your plate as X, Y, and Z title, and based on what they do. What prompted you to take the 30 minutes out of your day to book this call? Because I want to tailor it to you, and the more I know about why you booked the call, the better I can do that. And so that's my softer way of saying it, but you can ask it in different ways. But ultimately, first things first, why are we on this call? I know that sometimes if it's an inbound lead or maybe it's come through an SDR, you may have some of that context. And so you can then tailor the question like, hey, I saw you wanted to have this call with me because you're looking for a new influencer marketing software. Like, tell me about what you were hoping to get out of the call today. Why are we here? What are you hoping I can help you with? So I think that's the first thing is like understanding what someone's motivation is. Um, it's also a really key question because to your point, someone may rattle off for 20 minutes about things that are completely not relevant to what you offer. Like, you want to make sure that they're there for the right reason. And if you guys aren't aligned, that you catch that early in the call and you either
Yep.
get aligned or you're able to say, I totally hear you. Like, we have some free resources, or I saw X, Y, and Z online that I can send you a link. I saw an article about this recently, but like, that's not what we do. And so, like, I wish you all the best and you're able to part ways. Yeah, that's my first favorite question. Okay, let's go to
Got
the
it.
other
What are
two.
the other
So,
two?
next one, what is your role as it pertains to X problem? And this is really key because I want to know titles aren't always telling. Someone could be a director and could be doing the work versus someone could have a different title and actually be like overseeing a team. You don't really know. You want to know who you're talking to. And so I want to know, are you the ultimate decision maker on this? Like, do you own this problem, or did your boss forward the email and ask you to just join the call so you're here by obligation to your boss? Essentially, are you the one that's in the day-to-day experiencing this problem, or are you overseeing the team that's experiencing the problem, or are you 3 levels removed from the problem and you heard it in a team meeting and because your team's so busy you just wanted to start taking calls? Like, I want to know what your role is as it pertains to this problem, because again, that's part of that groundwork of helping me understand what kind of questions I'm going to ask and what direction I want to go with my discovery.
Love it. Yeah. I love the
Yeah.
piece about not
Mhm.
assuming their role either because especially at larger enterprises, yeah, VP of sales, there's going to be multiple VPs of sales and
Yep.
there's going to be projects. Like there might be a project within the company to figure out outbound or to increase,
Right.
penetration into named accounts. Someone
Yes.
owns that project and is in charge of that, OKR. So understanding how their role pertains to that, great question. And
Ooh,
then what's
okay.
the
So
third?
this one, again, obvious, but skipped. I feel like a lot of reps I see and work with and coach, they're trying to come up with these brilliant, super detailed discovery questions, and those certainly have a time and place. And we forget to just literally ask directly, what is your biggest problem when it comes to X? If it's a hiring solution, like what is your biggest problem when it comes to
Yeah.
hiring? If it's time to hire and your solution solves for time to hire, then like boom, you're in the right place, right? Um, I learn a lot by asking this question because I feel like when I first started learning discovery and hearing reps, play around with discovery, it was like kind of like we're beating around the bush, like trying to get to this problem. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. I'm like, let's just ask. what is the biggest problem you're facing when it comes to this? And like, this is key to have that lay of the land and that groundwork to know where to dig deeper. Cause like, if your solution doesn't play to that biggest problem, like, again, you need to get alignment, or it may be a sign that this call isn't going to be worth your time and you have to politely part ways. And so, why'd you take the call? What is your role as it pertains to X problem? And um, what was my third one? What is your biggest problem when it comes to this? Like, what is the biggest struggle when it comes to that problem
Yep.
or achieving that outcome? Like, what's the thing that's bothering you the most that you think is the biggest problem?
So once we've gotten the conversation started here, how do we know when we've done enough discovery, at least for this call? Like, what are the things that we're trying to walk away from that conversation with and ultimately segue into,
Yeah.
next
Well, if
steps?
I identify, once we identify that someone is that they have the problems that I solve for, I'm going to spend the rest of the call trying to get really detailed information about those problems so that I can set myself up for my demo. And so, like, I think demos are really impactful
Mhm.
when you can pull quotes and utilize things like "you told me" statements. Like, Jason, you told me on the last call that, like, you would love to never speak to another influencer
Yep.
again. And that's what this software is going to do for you. It's going to allow you to scale your brand, right? Like, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to be able to essentially have enough to where you could customize the demo and show how a specific part of your software is going to
Yes.
solve
And I
something
feel
that they
like it
care
is
about.
easy. Like,
Cool. So
Discovery
why'd they
can
take the
run
call?
like discovery could be never ending. And I sometimes see reps they're running 40-minute or 60-minute discovery calls. Like,
Yeah.
know that you can always keep asking more, right? But the key is to balance, like, get the lay of the land and get as deep as you can within the time period that you have. Ideally, it's probably 20 to 30 minutes to give yourself enough to set you up for success, and try to avoid going down roads and paths that aren't actually relevant to what you solve, because that comes up a lot. I hear people having conversations about things that's like, well, this isn't actually what we're going to be able to solve for. So, like, it's useful insight, but I don't need to know everything about it. And so I think it's, again, that balance of like how I feel like you can continue to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So just be mindful of how, what are the basics that you need to actually be able to position your solution effectively and get them excited about what you offer.
Gotcha. Let's talk follow up, and then we'll probably have to bounce here with time. Um, so the last couple of minutes, how do you think about the securing
Yes.
next steps part of the conversation? And then what does the follow up look like after
Yes.
that between
Okay. So
the next call?
I've got a tip here. So I think what so I use the term BANT, and I know people use this in sales a lot. BANT, right? Budget, authority, needs, timeline. Ideally, by the end of the discovery call, like, you figured out who you're talking to, you know what the needs are. So my tip when I'm coaching is I usually bring up the T, like timeline, like why are what should the next step be, and so and when should it be. So what I see a lot is sales reps will say something like all right, Jason, well, like, glad it looks good, I'll send you everything, and I'll follow up with you next week. Maybe they're talking to their boss tomorrow, like, or maybe this is something that's for 6 months down the road.
Yeah.
So, like, figure out what's going to happen next on their end and tailor your follow up and your next steps accordingly. And so my favorite way to tee this up is like, okay, Jason, so, like, great, glad we got the chance to speak. I'll go ahead and send everything over to you. What happens next on your end? Oh, I'm going to meet with my boss. Oh, cool. When are you guys meeting? Oh, we're meeting on Tuesday. Okay, cool.
Yep.
What does your boss what do they care about? What are they going to want to see? Well, they really care about numbers and data. Okay, cool. Like, are you going to forward them an email? Are you going to present a slide deck? Or are you going to, do they want a one pager executive summary? Like, in what way are you going to present the information? Like, once you know all of that, your follow up becomes a lot easier, right? Because if they say, let's say you say, all right, I'm going to meet with my boss tomorrow, and I'm going to pull together, I'm going to take these slides today and present them in our one on one. Then you can follow up the next day and say, how did the meeting go with Jim? Any feedback on the slides we pulled together? What were his thoughts?
Yeah.
Or, let's say someone needs 6 months, like, your follow-up is going to be very different depending on someone's timeline, and what you learned from that. And so I think this is just like the message I want to drive home is, like, make sure that you're hitting the T in terms of timeline of what is going to happen next on their end, and make sure that you're tailoring your follow up accordingly and not just doing a blanket, I bump everyone in my pipeline once a week, or the standard, I'll follow up next week. Like set a date and a time for that next step too. You want to figure out what's happening
Yeah.
and then decide together what that next step should be. And like, yes, ideally the next step is a call, but there are certain instances where the next step may not be a call. Like maybe you've already had 2 calls and the next step is like, all right, I'm gonna present this to Jim. Jim's gonna have some concerns. And so why don't we connect and you can share what his concerns are and we can go from there. Like it's gonna depend. And so I think the key is like figure out what's gonna happen next, tailor your follow-up accordingly, and ideally you firm this up before the call ends, right? Because once that call ends, like the person's gone. And so make sure that you essentially, I know there's different terms for this, but it's essentially like building a
Yep.
mutually agreeing to a follow-up plan of what's going to happen next and when. Like what are the next steps to progress this forward.
Yep. Love it. And with that, we're out of time. And I want to highlight this because I sometimes forget to do this, where you did like a really good call and talked about a lot of stuff, and you forget to ask, like, hey, I get that we're going to be talking next week at X day and time,
Yep.
but like, what are you going to
Yep.
be doing in the meantime? Just
Knowing and then being
knowing
able
what
to
that is
support,
super helpful.
it's knowing
Um,
and supporting,
this is great, Janelle. So we talked.
if their boss is going to have X, Y,
Yep,
and Z concerns, you probably have materials that you can send to that person to help them with that conversation. So yeah, it's a good one to talk about.
exactly. There we go. So there's prep, how to do the vision matching piece, the follow up, questions that you can ask, and before you bounce, where can people go to connect with you and learn
Yeah, you can
more
find me on
about what you're up
LinkedIn.
to?
I'm committed. 2024. I'm following in your footsteps, Jason. I'm gonna try to post every day this year. We're gonna see. We're gonna see what comes of it.
That's right. Cool. So go connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show and sharing everything on discovery. And make sure if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. Would really appreciate it. And that's all we got for you today.